بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وقل ربي زدني علما الحمد لله Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Mubarak. For those of you who might be coming on for the first time, we're looking at the approach that one of the great scholars of Andalusia, Ibn Juzayy al-Kalbi, had towards the Quran, looking at the 7 different meanings, and all of these meanings are found in the Fatihah, which is one of the reasons why the Fatihah is considered really a microcosm of the entire Quran. It is, in fact, al-Quran al-Azim, Sab' al-Mathani, wal-Quran al-Azim. So it contains all of these meanings in them. And so that's where we were going to start today, is looking at the meanings. The first one is that he points out is the ilm al-rububiyyah. In Arabic, the Rabb is a word that is related in the ishtiqaq. There's different types of derivations. There's actually 4 types of derivations in the Arabic language, but words that share letters have a shared meaning, even when the letter is not in the same order. So for instance, like you have in Arabic, you have alima, and then you have amila, and then you have lama'a. So they all share lam, mim, and ayn, and they all have a relationship. So for instance, ilm and amal are related. You can't do something without having knowledge of how to do it. If you do, it's insane, like Imam al-Ghazali said. And then al-ma'i is like a brilliant scholar. It's somebody who has a type of a brilliance in his understanding. So there's a relationship. So in Arabic, the word Rabb, which the root of it is ra ba ba, but related to it is ra ba ya, and this is another type of ishtiqaq, where you have the last letter in particular will give a nuance of the meaning. So one of the meanings of Rabb is murabbi, the one who raises or who nurtures you and cares for you. So it's different from ilah. Ilah it's more transcendent, and then Rabb is more immanent, it's closer, it's more intimate, it's closer to us. So ilm al-rububiyyah is related to how Allah reveals himself to us through his creation, because we are marbub, we're lorded over. Although in Arabic you have words like Rabb al-Manzil or Rabbat al-Manzil, which is acceptable to say the Lord of the house. But the Rabb al-Arbab, the Lord of the Lords, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the ilm al-rububiyyah is knowledge of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is manifesting himself in creation. Because the word in Arabic for the world, I mean, there are a few different words, but the main word that's used is alam. Rabbul Alameen. So this is how Fatiha begins. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So the alam is from alima, which is to know. And so alam is what you know. But if you look in Arabic, alam is called ismu ala. The pattern fa'al is the pattern of the instrument. So it's the noun of instrument. Instrument is what you do something with. And so in the Arabic language, for instance, if you say khatam is a seal. It's what you seal with. So it's the instrument of sealing. So alam is the instrument of your knowledge. It's what enables you to know. So the world is what enables us to know Allah. Right? Allah is the Rabbul Alameen. So he's created all these worlds, and this is how we know him, through the world. So this is ilm al-rububiyyah. This is the fundamental aspect of the Quran. When you go into the Quran, you will see that constantly Allah is telling us to look at His creation. وَإِلَى الْإِبِرِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Haven't you looked at the camel and how it's created? زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحِ. We ornamented the skies. The heavens declare His glory. There are many verses, siru fil ard fanduru, like travel in the earth and look and go and look at the previous civilizations, look at what happened to them, look at people who went astray and how they brought themselves to destruction. Pompeii is one of the most amazing places for this, for itibar. I haven't been there, but Pompeii was the Las Vegas of ancient Rome, literally. I mean, Pompeii was where they went to what happens in Pompeii stays in Pompeii. I mean, it was literally the Las Vegas of the Roman wealthy. So they would go there and they worshiped the phallus. So on all the houses they had pornographic images, and they actually have a museum where you can go see it. I mean, it's got all the pornographic images that were maintained in the house because of in the houses. I mean, it's pretty shocking, graphic pornography. So this was Pompeii, and yet Mount Vesuvius erupts, and it was so fast that people are literally stuck in positions. That's how quick the ash came down. So that we literally have this ancient city that was completely preserved. And that's a sign, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. Reflect deeply, O people, of why Pompeii, of all cities? Because, and that was clearly a punishment, because one of the things, when it happens like suddenly like that, it's clearly something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these things, modern people have a really hard time with these ideas for some reason, because they just don't want to take any moral responsibility for what happens to them. But we have a direct understanding between the physical world and the metaphysical world. So ilm al-rububiyyah is very important. So for instance, Allahu la ilaha illahu al-hayyul qayyum. This is ilm al-rububiyyah. He is the living and the sustainer. La ta'khuduhu sinatun wa la nawm. He doesn't nod off. So even for one instant, if he turned away from creation, it would disappear. So he doesn't nod off and he doesn't sleep. So these are all, and there are many, many, I mean, the Quran is just filled with the ilm al-rububiyyah. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم إن زلزلة الساعة شيء عظيم يوم ترونها تذهل. This ayah has rububiyyah, but it also has ma'ad, it has other things in it. when كل مرضعة عما أرضعت وتضع كل ذات حمل حملها وترى الناس سكارى وما هم بسكارى ولكن عذاب الله شديد. So it's telling you that, Allah He does all of these things and His punishment is immense, right? And then there's people who وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَيَتَّبِعَ كُلَّ شَيْطَانٍ مَرِيدٍ. So there's people that argue about God without any knowledge and they follow the shayateen. So Allah is throughout the Quran teaching us these things about divinity. So if you look, it affirms the existence of the Maker, Al-Bari, because Allah is Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari, Al-Musawwir. So the Khaliq brings existence out of non-existence. And then the Bari is the one who, from this world that He's created, the cosmos, so whatever the Big Bang was, suddenly you have all this material to work with. And so Allah creates that material, and then He works with it. He makes planets and solar systems, and then yusawwiru, and then He fashions from that all these things within creation. So these are the stages of creation are in that. And then He explains that creation indicates a creator. حاجة كل محدث لصانع, وجوده له دليل قاطع. His existence has an apodictic proof. It has an absolute proof, a burhan for His existence, and that is that everything that is created needs a creator. You can't have something, and this is why, again, there's people that have tried to refute this, but this is the fundamental fitrah of people, that it is impossible for people to believe that things just come out of nothing. And we now know through our material sciences the dominant opinion. I mean, it could change, but the dominant opinion of cosmologists, which is the study of the cosmology is the study of where this all came from. The dominant opinion is that it had a beginning, right? There was this energy that exploded, and then suddenly we have this universe that's expanding, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّ لَهُ مُوسِعُونَ. We are expanding it, right? And then in the end, they call it the big crunch. And Allah calls it in the Quran, the طَيَّ السِّجِّل, like He rolls it up, like He rolls up a scroll. So we have the Big Bang and then the Big Crunch. And the Quran indicates both of those. And then also it affirms the unicity of God, which is the act of being one. Allah is simple. In theology, I use that term simple, which simply means that Allah is not compound. You know, there's no parts. So God doesn't have any parts. He's not, and that's what, you know, He's قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. He is absolutely unique and one in His acts, attributes, in His essence, His attributes, and His acts. He's one in all three, right? And so He's not three in one. He's one with those three dimensions. And this is why Trinity is, you know, it's a really interesting thing in the world. That's why trigonometry is such a fascinating study, because it's hard to get out of triads. They're everywhere. And so you can see how Christian theologians fell into that mistake, which is what Allah warns them against in the Quran. لا تقولوا ثلاثة انتهوا. You know, don't say that. But we acknowledge this aspect of looking at God and seeing the three aspects that He expresses His oneness in, which is He's one in His essence, but then He has attributes, and then He has His acts, and then the acts are divided into created, uncreated. I mean, these are theology, you get into these things. And then refutes those who associate powers with Allah. So one of the things about polytheists is the problem with translating mushrikun as polytheists is that the mushrik, the materialist today is a mushrik. Anybody that gives power or attributes of God that are God's alone to other than God. So if you're a Darwinian evolutionary biologist and you think that somehow nature has a mechanism that it can do these things, and you don't acknowledge that that comes from God, that's shirk, because you're giving nature an attribute. In fact, nature is a modern day word for God. But whenever you hear people say, well, nature, you know, Mother Nature doesn't like, you know, promiscuity, right? Because that's why you get diseases and things like that. No, God doesn't like it, and that's, you know, the way He set His creation up. So, and then finally, it provides the attributes of Allah. So throughout the Quran, you have all of these amazing attributes of Allah. Now, when we get into prophecy, so it confirms the prophethood of the prophets in general. Now, the Quran clearly states that every peoples have had prophets, and so we don't know the Native American peoples here. At some point, they had prophets. There's no people that didn't have prophets. And this is one of the beauties of Islam, because it doesn't limit prophecy to the Semitic peoples. In the Christian understanding, they tend to see that it's limited to the Jewish peoples and then culminates in the coming of Christ. But for Muslims, we see prophecy was everywhere. And that's why there's echoes of prophecy in all traditions. Like you will see this even in the ancient Celtic traditions. If you read like the Book of Cormac, you know, you can see prophetic truths in that. If you read the Analects of Confucius, I mean, we don't even know, was Confucius a prophet, or I don't know. I mean, he's before Islam, but when you read the Analects, it's like reading hadith. It sounds like if he wasn't a prophet, it's from the nibras an-nubuwah. It's from that lamp of prophecy. And the same is true in the Vedic scriptures, in Hinduism, and certainly in Buddhism. You see these prophetic truths, and that's why we acknowledge, we can't say for certain about things that the Quran hasn't mentioned, but it's a high probability, which is why, even I wrote a book called Buddha in the Quran, not a book, but an essay in a book called Buddha in the Quran, and I wrote that because when I was reading Asfarayini, he has a section on Buddhism, and when he finishes it, he says, if the accounts of the Buddhists are true about Buddha, then he's probably al-Khidr. And I thought that was so interesting that he would say that, and so then I did a whole study on Khidr, and there were so many parallels. There's traditions in our tradition that he was a prince who gave up his kingdom, and so it was very interesting. But whether he was a prophet or not, they call him al-Budd in Arabic, whether he was a prophet or not, I don't know, but he was certainly an enlightened being. And that ilm al-ladunni is what al-Khidr was described as having, that it wasn't prophecy, it was an enlightenment directly from God. So Allahu alam there, we have to say that. And then confirms the prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad in particular. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was mentioned. Why were the Jews in Medina? Why were the Jews there in Medina? Why would you go to Arabia? When you've got Palestine, it's the land of milk and honey. And yet they were in this really difficult place to live because they were expecting a prophet. And Salman al-Farisi, why was he searching? And you find this throughout the ancient world. People knew that these people come into the world, and they have very similar stories. If you read the story of, if you read in Herodotus the story of Kurush, Cyrus, is that how they say it in Persian? Kurush? Yeah. Cyrus, to me, that story is a prophetic story. I don't think he was a prophet, but that story, the story of his life is clearly, the divine providence in his life is so manifest, it's beyond belief. And I personally think he's Dhul-Qarnayn. I don't think it's Alexander the Great. I think Kurush is a much better candidate for Dhul-Qarnayn. Allahu alam. And so there are Mufassirun that have said that. And that was the opinion of the great Indian scholar Abu Kalam Azad, rahimahullah. He's a great man. So there are many confirmations. Isa alayhi salam says, that he's mubasharan bi rasulin ya'ti min ba'di ismuhu Ahmed. It's very interesting. He said Ahmed. Like, why did he say Ahmed? Why didn't he say Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What is the name Ahmed? Where is that name? When is the Prophet Ahmed? Yeah, but when is he Ahmed? On the Day of Judgment. That's his name on Yawm al-Qiyamah. What is his role on the Yawm al-Qiyamah? He's the Paraclete, because Parakletos in Arabic, in Greek, means the intercessor, the advocate. So he used the name of the advocate. He's the advocate on the Day of Judgment, and that's why we believe that he's mentioned in John. In the Gospel of John as the Parakletos. The Christians see that as the Holy Spirit, but we see that as a clear reference to the Prophet ﷺ. And then also you find references in Isaiah and even in the Book of Solomon, in the Song of Songs, he's mentioned with his actual name, Muhammadim. So this is our belief, and the Prophet ﷺ certainly has all of the characteristics or qualities of an Old Testament prophet and more. I think the Christians are veiled because of how they perceive prophecy through Jesus, because it's so different from, whereas Moses, in the Old Testament it says, we will raise a prophet like unto thee at the end of time. And they say that's Christ, but Christ wasn't like Moses. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was like Moses. Christ is not a lawgiver. He doesn't bring a law. The Prophet ﷺ brought a law. He doesn't lead his people on an exodus. Many examples from the pharaoh of this ummah. The Prophet called, Abu Jahl the pharaoh, so it's like the Quraysh were like a pharaonic entity. And then confirms the existence of angels, which is very important here, the angels that are everywhere. I mean, we're just the angels are doing all kinds of work, and I mean, the angel is the one that, calls your attention. When I was 17, I was driving, I was really late at night, and I was driving, and I fell asleep at the wheel, and I was just about to crash into a telephone pole, and I got yanked, like literally just yanked out of and I just missed the pole. But it's like, if it was your time, the angel just, I can't do anything. But if it's not your time, wake up, dummy. It's not your time, right? So the angels are doing all that. So, and I, when I did statistics in college, what I realized about statistics, it's a purely descriptive science. And I actually believe that if the world was somehow, there should be far more accidents than there actually are in the world. Like when you look at people on the road, and everybody's like somnambulant, they're just not there. Or you think of a child, like how does a 3 or a 4-year-old get through a day without killing himself? It has to be the angels, right? I mean, it's just amazing. So, and then resurrection, al-ma'ad, which is really important. And just about the, so on the angels, if you look at Surah Al-An'am on the messenger, I want to just, in 683, it's chapter 6 and verses 83 through 86, it's called Tilka Hujjatuna. There's 18 of the prophets that are mentioned in that in that verse, and then there's 7 more that are mentioned throughout the Quran. And so these are all the prophets. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, آتيناها تلك حجتنا, this is our proof that we gave to Ibrahim على قومه نرفع درجات من نشاء, we elevate in ranks whom we please. إن ربك حكيم عليم, he has hikmah and ilm. وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ, and then we gave him Ishaq and Jacob. So Isaac and Jacob come from Ibrahim alayhi salam. هَدَيْنَا وَنُوحًا كُلًّا هَدَيْنَا وَنُوحًا هَدَيْنَا مِنْ قَبْلُ, and before that we gave Nuh guidance. وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِهِ دَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ وَأَيُّوبَ وَيُوسَف وَمُوسَى وَهَارُونَ وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. So these are all the prophets before that are mentioned in the Quran. وَزَكَرِيَّا وَيَحْيَا وَعِيسَى وَإِلْيَاسَ. Ilyas is Elijah in the Old Testament. كُلٌّ مِّنَ الصَّالِحِينَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ وَالْيَسَعَ. Al-Yasa is Elisha. He's called Elisha in the Old Testament. And then Yunus is Jonah, and Lut alayhi salam is Luta. كُلًّا فَضَّلْنَا عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. So these are the ones that were privileged. So that's in Surah Al-An'am. And then you add to that في تلك حجتنا منهم 8 من بعد 10 وسبعة يبقى. So there's after that there's 7 يبقى 7 وهم إدريس هود شعيب صالح وكذا ذو الكفل وآدم وبالمختار ختموا. So these are the 7 after that are mentioned. Idris and Hud, and Shu'aib is Jethro in the Old Testament, and then Salih. The Hud and Salih are Arabian prophets, and then Zulkifli is sometimes called Hizqil in the commentaries. Hizqil, he's Ezekiel in the Bible. There's a book, the book of Ezekiel, so he's a very important prophet in the Jewish tradition. So these are all of the prophets. There's 25 mentioned in the Quran. Now, there's khilaf about there's a khilaf about Maryam, because the Annunciation, which is in the Quran, the Annunciation, which the Christians also believe in, when she's told by the angel that she will have Jesus, that seems like direct revelation from and that was the position of Ibn Hajar and some of the other great scholars. But generally, the vast majority of scholars said that she was a Siddiqah, that she's not a Nabiya, that she's the highest before the prophets, and that one of the prerequisites for a prophet is that they're male. But there are some serious scholars that thought that there were female prophets, but not Rusul, so that women that had direct revelation from God, but did not, but they don't bring messages to them. So that, and then we get into the the ma'ad is the confirmation of the resurrection, and then provides decisive arguments for the resurrection, refutes those who reject the resurrection, and describes what will be experienced in the afterlife. There's so many verses in there about the ma'ad in the Quran. There's not one chapter in the Quran that doesn't have countless, I mean, you could count them, but I'm hyperbole, that doesn't have many, many references to the afterlife. So that's a very important point. So the next section is going to be on ahkam, so that's a whole other bab. So we'll leave that to the next class. So do we have some questions, Harun?
Okay, Bismillah, Barakallah Feekum. The first question we'll take says that many of our esteemed scholars went to prison for the belief in the Quran being uncreated. Can the Shaykh kindly elaborate on the importance of this belief in our creed and the implications of believing the Quran was/is created?
Yeah, Bismillah. So this mas'ala, this issue it's from daqiq al-kalam. It's from the more very subtle aspects of theology. It's not something I think really people should get involved in. Ahmed ibn Hanbal was famous for standing up against the Mu'tazilite. The Mu'tazilite argued that the Quran was muhdath, that it was created. The Sunnis arrived at, there's two different opinions. One is the Athari opinion, which is Ahmed ibn Hanbal's, where you don't go into details. You just say, Al-Quran kalam Allah, ghayru makhluq. It's kalam Allah and it's uncreated. The other one is the more subtle, which is the Ash'ari and the Maturidi position, which is that the uncreated Quran is madlul al-lafzi al-qa'imi bi dhatillah. It's what the indications of, but the Mus'haf itself, and the ulama say you can always say this in a teaching, just out of adab to the Quran, we don't say it, but the Mus'haf itself came into the world, the paper, the ink, right, and then the letters, and when if I say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, those are sounds. And we know that they have vibrations, and so that aspect of the Quran, and this is the distinction they say, is all of those elements are created. And like in Idatul Jannah, إنما كلامه قديم ما فيه تأخير ولا تقديم نعم ولا لحن أو إعراب وكلنا وبعض اضطراب إذ كله إلى الحدوث انتسم ككون علمه على مكتسبة. So he's saying that everything, the kalam of Allah is qadim. There's ما فيه تأخير ولا تقديم. There's no first and last. It's not linear in that way. So this is really about the logos. And this issue came up because the Christians asked this. They said the kalima, that Isa is the kalima of Allah and the kalima is qadim and this and that. So we say Al-Quran karam Allah ghair makhluq. I mean, that's our position, and it definitely doesn't mean though the mushaf that you have in your house, because that would then I mean, some of the Christians argue that, well, the Quran is imbibliation. Like we believe in incarnation of the Logos. The Muslims believe in imbibliation of the Logos. You know, that God became book. And so we wouldn't see that as a valid view of it. So.
Barakallahu feekum. Next question is, I heard Sheikh Hamza translating the Qur'anic word taqwa to God consciousness. Some imams in Italy still prefer the meaning of quote-unquote fear or being afraid or frightened. I would like to know the basis of this choice, why and how. Thank you.
Well, yeah. First of all, when we do these, there aren't really translations, they're interpretations. And that's why A.J. Arbery, despite the fact that he was a Christian, as far as I know, he may have been a crypto-Muslim, and Allahu Alam. I mean, he seems to indicate that in his introduction. But A.J. Arbery, I think, was one of the few quote-unquote translators of the Quran that really got it right, because he said an interpretation of the Quran. Because you cannot translate the Quran. There's far too many nuanced meanings in Arabic. And then the thing about Arabic, in some ways it's the most precise of languages. In other ways, it's a very ambiguous, because it allows for multiple interpretations. Like many things, I mean, language is like that. Language is very hard to pin down. And this is, I mean, Derrida created a whole philosophy out of the impossibility of pinning down words, because words are self-referential. You know, you look up a word, like if you look up a word in the dictionary, you know, like pool, and so you look that up, it'll say a basin of water, you know, and then you look up basin, it says something that holds water. You know, so, and this actually, when you study material logic, you'll really understand why Derrida is completely wrong, because concept precedes words. And so the concept is grasped. The word is just a way to articulate the concept that precedes the word. And this is why thought precedes language. It's hard for people to grasp that, but thought actually precedes language. So language is a vehicle. So I would, what do you think?
We had this discussion yesterday.
Oh, mashallah. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah. So what did he want to know? About taqwa?
Being
translated. So I would say taqwa is one of those words that is a comprehensive word in the Quran. Probably the closest word is pietas, the Latin word, which is used for, which we use in English, piety. And piety is dutiful obedience. You know, it's kind of, so in that way you're God conscious, you're aware of your duties, so you're fulfilling your duties, you're conscientious, and so that's how, you know, a God-conscious person is going to fulfill, because they're aware of God. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ said that ihsan was an ta'budullah ka'annaka tarahu, to worship Allah as if you see Him, and if you don't see Him, you know that He sees you. That's a God consciousness that is going to, I mean, I'll give you a really good example. Okay, most of us, not all of us, but most of us speed on the highway, right? Like, I don't. Sometimes. But most of us do. But if we see a policeman, suddenly we're like going the speed limit. You always see the red lights go on, right? Everybody's like cruising down the highway, and suddenly all these red lights go on, and then, oh, you see the black and white. That's because he has police consciousness. So suddenly he's obeying, he becomes consciously aware of the police, and then he becomes dutiful. He fulfills his duty to drive at the speed limit. Well, that in essence is what God consciousness is, that you're always aware of God, and so you're always going to follow the rules, which is what taqwa is. Because hasil taqwa, Ibn Ashur says, hasil taqwa ijtinabun wa imtithal fi zahirin wa batinin bidha tunal. Like, it is an awareness of God that that you fulfill your obligations and you avoid the prohibitions because you're consciously aware. So that's why I like that term. But it's certainly there are other terms that could be used for it. I mean, the root word is to prevent or ward off harm. And so in that way, there's kind of a fearful awareness, of harm, the possibility of harm. So they're all interpretations.
Thank you for that. There are lots of questions about memorization. Let me try to take this one here. In terms of daily recitation of Qur'an outside of Ramadan, should priority be given to reciting recommended surahs like Yasin, Waqi'ah, Mulk, Sajda, and so forth, or completing a daily juz?
That's a really good question. If you are somebody who is doing devotional practice and you have then I would say it's really good to do those Yasin in the morning, and then Waqi'ah after Maghrib, Mulk, and Sajda is also encouraged before you sleep. And then on Friday, Kahf is a practice of the Prophet, and Hud, both Kahf and Hud. So those are pretty long chapters. So those are really good to do, but it's very good to do a juz every day. If you could do both, that's kind of ideal. If you had to choose one or the other, it depends, I think, on what you should still be reading the Quran. If you don't do it every month, you should still be trying to read it a few times a year all the way through. So I would do something on top of those practices, even if it's like work out how much it would be, like a thuman or a ruba' or nisf al-hizb or something, to where you're going to do the Quran at least twice a year. I wouldn't neglect the Quran like that. And for those who don't know Arabic, it's good to read translations, but just recognize the limitations of translation. And then also you have to go to the Book of Allah. And we're going to get into this when we get into the section on the knowledges that you have to know in order to interpret the Quran. You have to know a lot of knowledges. I mean, just the huruf of Quran are very difficult. I mean, it takes quite. You look at like a letter like aw, alif, waw. I mean, it has all these possibilities in the Quran. It's atf generally, harfu atf. It's a conjunction, but sometimes it means shak. It means doubt. Sometimes it means takhyir. It's like a choice. Sometimes it means ibham. It's leaving something ambiguous. Sometimes it means idrab, like it's. Sometimes it means tafsil, and sometimes it just means wow. It literally has the same meaning as wow, as a conjunction. So that's just one letter in the Quran. So you have a lot of that. And one of the things about AI can't deal with prepositions. It's the big bugbear in AI, because prepositions are so complicated in all languages, because they have multiple possibilities. And we tend to forget these things. Like if you just take a word, like look in the Bantam dictionary under the word follow. Just look under like Bantam's dictionary, follow, and look at all of the nuanced meanings of follow. Like I need to follow up on that. I'd follow him anywhere. He followed him in the directorship. I mean, it just has all these meanings, and we learn them just through education. We don't think about these things because language acquisition is such a mystery. So you have to be very humble going to the Quran. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وتب علينا اللهم لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وقوت الأرواح وغذائها وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم اجعل القرآن العظيم ربيع قلوبنا وجلاء همومنا وذهاب غمومنا. اللهم اجعل هذا الكتاب جاريا على ألسنتنا معمول في أركاننا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إن شاء الله اجعل آخر كلمتنا أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. وتقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا مع تقصيرنا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.